All right. Hello, everybody. Today, starting from new devices from our new office. So, we had a short relocation of spaces, but now everything should be alright. Let's quick check. Connection seems excellent. Alright, so this should be right. So we have a test, we have a good lighting system, alright, that's nice. Just close the doors. And now we are prepared. Alright. Things are working. Okay, so one still missing. Why exactly is this? Just a water, thank you. Let's check. So still some technical elements missing. Let's check what is missing. Navisus, tech. Horrible. Good. Abacus TCG Live. Okay, we have here Abacus TCG. Let's go. All right. So now everything is fine. Everything should be great. And we have our system set it up. All right. So hello everybody. Here's Anderson again from Abacus TCG. And today in the live number 005, we have a new opening to say. So we have a new office. So as you can see, we did a relocation in the same building, but now we have a new lighting system. We also have the companionship of our mascot, and also we have a new set of tables. So now we have tables that allow us to regulate the height, and we do this automatically, which is pretty cool. And also from a new types of updates, what we also have is that we are preparing for our first financing round. And because of this, we're both testing new software with new users, and this whole phase of design thinking, as I mentioned, at this prototype version, we are really accelerating to our demo day, which is it's similar to a demo day, but is basically an investors day, which is going to be held on 18th of September. And this is going to be probably very likely to bring us some money so we can keep running our operations and deliver even more good products for all of you. And we are very, very proud to be tackling these new challenges and hopefully be able to create better products. And what I want to share with all of you today was one of the new releases that we had regarding the design part. So as I mentioned to all of you in the previous live, currently we're in this prototype phase. And as a startup, usually you have to pay attention to two elements. Or you are building technology or you're selling technology. And on best cases, you are doing both. In this specific scenario, we had one meeting with our mentor on yesterday evening. So we're talking about Sunday. I think we started around 10 p.m. and we finished around 11, which for a Sunday is quite special. It's not something that we do in a frequent basis for sure. And what we had from this perspective was, what is underlying magic in this product? So there are, even though the game industry is huge, and we're talking about many types of games, so tabletop games, digital games, physical games, there is such a big universe that basically comes to the question, like, what is the underlying magic that we can bring into this world? And something that we observed during the interviews was many players actually stopped playing a game or just left after the hype, mostly because of the lack of onboarding. So when you have to play a new game, it always comes to this part, specifically digital trading card games, on how is this onboarding proceed. And usually you have the small book that you're going to learn the rules, or most of the cases you just learn by trial and error, which has many well-known titles from these big brands. And we want to tackle this problem. And the way that we found as the most effective is to really have a character that is going to be together with you, really guiding through this whole process. And you can imagine this character the same way that you had, for example, in very well-known cases like Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh!, where we had these characters, and you basically, what we bring is this exchange, this interaction with this type of creatures. And we, of course, we have a back of an AI basis to enable this interaction to happen. But we want to do this as something very insightful and meaningful for all of our players. And that's what is one of the biggest challenges that we're currently facing. And besides that, we have this tight deadline. So the event is planned to be held on 18th of September. So we have around about 1 month for preparation. And that's the part about the technology that I mentioned to you all in the beginning of the video. We have 2 sections that we tackle as a startup. One is the building side and another one is the selling side. And because we're doing both concomitantly, it's quite a stressful but very interesting approach because you learn a lot from both sides. So from the selling part, even though as you can see, we don't have exactly a sell button for the game, but what we do have in the sales part is the pitch preparation. And in this point on, the technology comes in the backbone on how to explain the trading card game. How is it make more easy and more understandable for the customers, for the players, in this case you, on how to play it. And this is not an easy task because people come with different background. It's not as exactly as we had, for example, a series of cartoons or mangakas, which already give this introduction on how does the game works, how are the mechanics, which are the types of characters, which context. These informations are already missing beforehand because these type of products, even though they're amazing, they also require a lot of time and effort. So what we came up in this one day of work, or actually this evening, was basically a design prototype where you would be able to have some exchange with the character and evaluate from this point on. And this was not an easy task because we have been testing different technologies, and also if you know a type of AI that is very helpful in this case, both in character creation, character animation, and basically this traceability of emotions, because we are training this model to be something like very pleasant that you can really exchange with and having these good times, please let us know in the comments. You can write us per email or just easily type here down, and we always see all the comments. And just to give you all an overview or a short recap on why is this type of interaction so important, you can easily imagine this type of companionship. For example, what we have the Kangar, or for example with Pikachu, is basically like a sports coach which is going to assist you in 3 specific cases that we planned. Remember that in any type of sport, usually the sport coaches help you before the game, during the game, and after the game. And that's exactly what we tackle on. So when you have this interaction with the creature, you have these insightful moments before the game, where the creature is going to help you selecting the best cards, the better strategies based on what you currently have. And then basically with these better strategies, you increase your likelihood to win. So you're better prepared, you have more insights, and this increases the likelihood of winning matches. And also which type of cards that you're aiming for, because we have now 3 different types of decks. So we have the forest deck, we have the fire deck, and we have the abyss deck. And that's interesting because what are the best combinations that you can have, which are the best effects to combine. And all of these informations, they're very important because they really help you on a better deck composition and deck balance. So this was the first step about the pre-game. Now comes the during the game phase. And if you remember a sports coach during the game, what he's doing, he or she, is basically ensuring that the rules are being followed and also slight improvements. So the coach is on your side. And because the coach is on your side, you get small tips, things that you can quickly adapt. So something very light, but just to give you like a north, like in a ship where we need to sometimes slightly pivot into the right direction. And instead of having these huge manual books where you have to recheck the rules and maybe sometimes not clear, your creature is there for you, for assisting you in this specific element. And when we talk about the third element, which is the after game phase, then we're talking about a moment that the sports coach is going to cheer with you in a case of a win, which you have this good interaction moment, this celebration, but also the recap of the game. What are the things that were good? Where are the areas of improvement? And basically you have really this feedback forward session. And this is key in order to get like better strategies and also to improve as a player. And we hope to do this insightful and at scale. But of course, with this comes a lot of effort and time and requires a lot of attention from our side. So this is what we have been working since yesterday evening, since we had a meeting. And it has not been easy because it's a short time frame until this prize competition. So you have this Investors Day, but it's something that of course we take in parallel, and we always aim for having a very good result. And yes, that's what have been keeping us busy from the past day. Now, one of the good possibilities of having the office is that we also have this characterized task or these characterized cups, which also brings more joy in the day-to-day activities, day-to-day work, and the daily operations. And of course, even though we're in this prototyping phase, we're actually in the whole design thinking process. We are exactly going to the end of the second part of the double diamond, which is the iteration part. And what is this iteration? So we have already built some prototypes, and now comes this feedback loop from the customer perspective. So we have already a preset of early players that were people that we interviewed, friends, colleagues, everyone, every stakeholder that was in exchange with us since the beginning of this project. And with this early base, we are presenting prototypes, and instead of explaining, we just ask, please test it or please play it. And we got a lot of feedback, specifically from the paper, from the physical versions, because the onboarding, even though we did our best in an early phase prototype, it was still not that clear. Sometimes it gets more clear to us because we are deep diving the topic, but for a person that was not part of development, which is of course the huge mainstream of players, it's still complex, the part. And it's very good that we get this type of feedback, because when we have this raw information about, hey, the game is interesting, I like this, I like that, but it's very difficult to start, or I don't understand exactly this effects sequence chain, or this just doesn't make sense for me. This type of feedback is gold for us for improving the game. Because when we have this perspective, we're like, okay, this that we assumed that was very well explained, maybe is not exactly as it is, or how can we do better? And one of the golden rules that we follow in design thinking, specifically applied to startups, is that it's impossible to spend too much time with your user base. It's impossible to spend too much time with your customers, which translating the terms means it's never a waste of time on hearing feedback. You can never say, oh my god, I spend too much time hearing the feedback. That's impossible. Because as more feedback you hear, you're more able to create better products and services. And that's the best way, because you're really building solutions, so you're really building products and services around humans, around the customers. And this increases likelihood that you have this product market fit, something that you build has a fit into your user base. So that's why for us it's always interesting when people write us per email, or just when we're testing, the prototypes, and someone is passing by and say, hey, I did this, or I tried with my family that, and I got this feedback, and this is interesting, or this is not that interesting. These feedbacks are key for us, because with these new insights, we're able to, okay, let's build this different. We had this feedback, let's do a quick prototype in one day that address this type of pain, this type of need, and let's test it. And what we do, we follow these insights. Well, if you remember, and this is something very interesting, if you hear the word IP, intellectual property, not the word, but this both words, what does it mean? Intellectual property, usually people think about patents, slow process, and high fees. And it's not wrong, because many people have advocated this over the years, or even actually over the decades. But as a startup, you have a very short amount of money, You have short budget, you have tight deadlines, and you need to show traction. You need to show that you're improving. You need to somehow present yourself and sell yourself that you have a big goal on site and you are taking the steps on this stair towards it. And when we say about we got this amount of prototype, we developed this amount of prototypes, and we got this amount of feedbacks. And from these received feedbacks, we did iteration phases and we redid this loop, and this is what we got in exchange. This type of information is a part of intellectual property, because instead of someone just speaking with a PowerPoint slide, and remember, PowerPoint accepts everything. You can try to suggest any type of crazy stuff. But when you say, hey, I got this type of feedback, I generated this type of information, and this information allows me to take better decisions to find this product market fit, this is intellectual property. This is something that aggregates value to your startup, and you don't need to exactly go to a patent office and try to protect it. Because this information is really, really insightful material that you use to take better decisions, and better decisions that bring you next to this product market fit. So, and this, you don't need exactly to have a huge infrastructure. No, please. It's really about going out to the real world and talk to users. Talk to users, talk to customers, talk with real people, get real data, and improve from this point on. And that's exactly what design thinking is about, and that's exactly what we have been doing over the past few months. And it's working. And now, very likely this is going to be maybe the last live where I personally present myself in person. Because one of the latest prototypes since yesterday was actually to have one of the creatures, probably the forest witch, that's also going to be interacting with our user base of players. And of course, this is still in prototype phase in an early condition, but this is something that we are already evaluating, because we really want to bring this immersion to the world, this type of immersion in the game. And we just had this quick prototyping idea that maybe it makes a lot of sense. So also we were eager to hear about the feedback on how this looked like, if it looks good, if it looks bad, if it looks weird. And this type of feedback, as I already mentioned it several times, is really valuable as gold for us, because it's interesting to know what you think, what you feel, and in this way we can also create better presentations and also to portray ourselves better. And we are still discussing design. So the first design, interesting approach, the first sketch that we had for Abyssus TCG was exactly the Forest Witch, which had this ink glazed glass shape like in a vitro. And this was the first prototype that we said, this is really the right direction, that we are aiming for having a high quality trading card game. And of course, the design changes a lot over the days. We were talking about different types of decks, which generated different types of effects, and this has a very strong impact on how the character looks like, on the game mechanics and the game balance, because we really want a set of strength, weakness, effect generated that also matches the physical part of the characters. And this is important for the whole identity of the card, or the contract, as we can say. And it was not been easy to balance this, because you still have a lot of problems creating the designs in a way that really express these feelings and really express those characteristics. And also you have been working with similar designs. We would love to hear in the comments and the feedback, because these are type of elements that we struggle here in the startup, because we don't still have a technology that is mature enough to produce this line of quality in a well-paced moment or in a well-paced strategy. And problems that we're taking on, but still in parallel in the whole pipeline of challenges that we have been taking on. And what do we aim actually for this 18th of September? This is actually quite a good question because, why we do what we do, roughly speaking. We have the aim of building this startup as a full-time and eventually scaling to the world. And for this, you need resources, which are human resources, but also economical resources. And it's very hard to do this in a parallel moment. So of course, we fight with the arms that we have, but we always have this on mind that we want to go full-time on this type of operation. And it's not easy because we all have different roles in our lives. Some of us are still students, some already finished studies, but most of the time that we have free for working hours at CCG are the evenings. And in the evenings, of course, you can easily say, okay, maybe you guys can work on 100 hours a week. But then comes the questions. Who does the laundry? Who cleans the room? Because you need clothes, you need to eat, you need a place to stay. And these things actually don't exactly fit in a 100 hours a week schedule. So what we do here is that most of our operations, like our personal activities between studies or work, is usually something around 40 hours a week. And in a startup basis, if you just allocate 20 hours a week, which ends up 16, you actually get a lot of things done because you have just this concise short of window time, and in this moment on, you start tackling these real world problems. So we're talking about, instead of wasting time, getting to the momentum, you already finished your activity, so you really are able to move from this point on and build stuff, make questions with your co-founders, compare points of view, and evolve from these elements further on. And these elements are key in order to understand how working better in basically this synergy together, and are we on track of our sides? Are we on track of our goals? And this is not easy because in a startup, you are basically building everything from scratch. You are creating the structures, you are creating the frameworks, and how you are gonna say, hey, this is late. It's quite hard when you have never done something similar and you still have to set up deadlines and follow this early on. Please also let us know if you have any type of framework that you already use in your startup or in your personal projects, or even your games that you play. If you have played, for example, similar case like, let's say, I think Stardew Valley does a pretty good job because it's an amazing game where you have so many things to do. And I'm not just talking about making the game platinum, but really the range of possibilities of crops, tools, what you're gonna do during the day, if you're gonna fish, if you're gonna go mining, if you're gonna do just work on your farm. There are so many possibilities that can be sometimes overwhelming. And even though it's an amazing game, I love and I play it would say somehow on a weekly basis, specifically after the update 1.6, I still miss the feeling of the Harvest Moon, which, if you remember from the Super Nintendo version, it didn't have exactly a threshold of time. So you could easily, after dinner time, you could easily stay on the game as much as you want, and there was not exactly a time limit. And this was very interesting because it was a relaxing element in the game. So you have played Stardew Valley specifically in the multiplayer version, you might somehow miss this feeling about, okay, I'm not in a hurry, I can stay in this time, I can plan how I'm gonna do this crop, I can plan my budget, I can plan just how I'm gonna fence my farm, and you have this time for yourself. And we actually went to bring also this lobby element into Abyssos TCG. So it's not exactly this pressure that you need to obtain the new cards, you need to obtain the new developments. But sometimes, when you enter in the game, you don't exactly want to already go chase the most rarest card. But sometimes you just want to stay there, chill, having an exchange with your contracts, and just have a good time after a complex day in your daily life. And we want to build a game that is very suitable for many people, and this is one of the elements that are very, very important for us. That you have this good time playing, even though you're not exactly playing the cards themselves. If you also have other games that you like it, some specific mechanic, specifically, for example, this chilling part, or even some players that tested us in the early prototypes, they were quite a huge fan of Tibia, which is also a gaming startup here from Germany. And they love to stay in the depot in the city because there was this protection zone and you could always find people there to talk. And you could learn English, you could learn a new language and just speak with people there. And it was somehow like a lobby effect. Also, because there was PvP worlds, this protection zone was somewhere that were somehow safe to stay, specifically if you were away from keyboard, IFK. And please let us know if there are other games or mechanics that you really miss in previous games that you're like, if we had this X, that would be amazing. Please, we would love to hear this type of inputs. Also, probably many of you who are watching these lives maybe are not exactly aware, but for PlayStation 1 we had the Yu-Gi-Oh! Forbidden Memories. And for those who remember, it was quite a groundbreaking technology at the time. First, because of the storytelling was very involving. So you had this whole past-present situation, and you also had this big threshold of cards. I think it was around 700, 720, 22. So you had like this big amount of cards, this big preset of cards, and it was a very involving storyline. It was very, very involving, and if you wanted, you could also, for many of the creatures there, you could also simulate the combat. So we had this with these polygons. So you had these 3D creatures which would fight against themselves, and then usually you would see who was the winner, even though you already knew beforehand by the attack power. But it was a graphical representation that was so groundbreaking for the time. And we want to bring something similar for all the players now. So this was somehow groundbreaking technology in the 90s, where we had the 3D version, you had the storytelling behind, but still it was a one-way system. You already had to follow this pre-scripted storytelling, and you just had an amount of possible dialogues. And what we want to bring is really a two-way interaction. So the cards communicate with you in the storytelling, but you also communicate with the cards. And this, of course, is going to also somehow changes the plot around how the game evolves in a regular basis. And it's not an easy challenge. I don't know any other card game in a similar case that allows this. But we think that's a very interesting challenge to be tackled on, because it's a technology that has never been built before, or probably there were some mock-ups or prototypes, and if you know someone that has been doing, please let us know, because we also like to have some inspiration from projects. But this is something that we are building from ourselves, from scratch, and we hope to have to achieve a level of development where we have an interesting game, interactive and scalable. And of course, there's the problem of the servers that are costly, the tokens that are used to generate this type of answers. Um, but again, startups should really aim for the future. It's a little bit, as this expression says, where you target to the moon or you aim to the moon, but your shoot ends up landing among the stars. So even if you have such an impossible outreach goal and you pursue this goal, even if you do not achieve it, you somewhere usually stay somewhere also in a noble place. You already get a high of greatness that really brings cool things and cool feedback on your project. And these are the type of challenges that really motivates us. So as far as we know, no one was able to achieve this level of scalability in a trading card game, and we want to be the first, and we want to have something that people really love to play. And in this whole universe, we are not just talking about trading card games, but the whole universe of cards. We're talking about different ways of cultural expressions. We're talking about merch. We're talking about so many new elements that are coming together that really make this whole universe more interesting and engaging. And also, if you're a fan, for example, from Yu-Gi-Oh or Pokemon, and to like specific, and there are specific elements that you really like about these other universes, please let us know if it's more in a merch basis, if it was something that happened in your childhood and you really love it, or if this is something that somehow is still missing. For example, if there's a problem in the server that you lose your cards, or maybe just a physical paper that somehow gets damaged along the way. We love to see both sides of the coin. So what are the things that are really interesting from these other types of universes, and where are, of course, the areas of improvement? Where are the things that need to be fixed in order to have an even more enjoyable game? And of course, in the games world, it's never exactly a winner takes all approach. We highly believe that as more and better games that we have, the better everybody benefits from it. So it's really not a sum-zero game, but actually an exponential upwards game where everybody just gets benefit because we have better games to be played on. That's our vision. And also about our technical release. So in the following weeks, I think first week of September, I'm gonna be on France. We also have a prototype demo there, and very likely this is going to affect our first scheduled launch, which was first planned the 3rd of September. So we're still figuring out if we're gonna do somehow this in a remote basis. So me in France and the whole team here in Germany, and organize the launch, or if we're gonna do maybe 1 week earlier or 1 week later. So this somehow, thankfully, things that we can adjust before the Investors Day, which is going to be on 18th. And this somehow something that we are gonna tackle about. Is this something that we can tackle it, and we can maybe get some funding and really maybe go on this full time? So this is one possibility, of course. And the second one is really showing, hey, we have this incredibly audacious goal. Can we tackle this? And this is what moved most of the most interesting startups, in my point of view. When you make somehow it gets close to an unrealistic goal, and you set this goal, and like, what are the steps? What are the structure that you takes in order to tackle this type of challenge? And this makes the whole journey interesting. Not easy, but very interesting, as any good adventure. So we have been tackling this over the past few months, collecting customers' feedback, collecting what are the pains, the needs, the wishes, what can be improved in the physical cards, also in the digital games. Thankfully, I would say from my perspective, today we have a very good team to be tackling this type of challenges. And with this type of elements, always comes with the question, how fast can you ship and how good can you make your products? So scalability still remains a question mark because these type of interactions are very energy consuming. But if there is something that you really, really want to execute, usually you find a way out. How? We're still not that sure, but we tackle this and we hope to get something very tangible, specifically before the launch. And also regarding the platform, the last time that we spoke, I think we have been tackling very likely the launch on itch.io, and we're also considering the Steam scenario. But still, with this generative AI in the discussion, was still somehow challenging, right? Specifically about this integration, at least from what. At least it was from the last talk that we had, and again, these are somehow challenges that comes along the way, and again, how can we better address this type of issues? And not easy tackling. So actually, right now, if you think about in a startup perspective, what we are doing, so we are doing this design prototype specifically for the game perspective. We're building this digital model of the creature because this interaction is really the key element. We're also tackling what is going to be the content of the game because the creature also needs to give this introduction. How are the rules? How does it work without, losing the subject? We're also in the middle of this fundraising round, which is going to be decisive on 18th of September in 1 month. And I would say also launching on the platform itself. This is not exactly a challenge, but it's really like something that you need this package. So you have this ready to ship product. And we're also just building our new online version of this customer base. So as we can see here on the lives, and we're tackling so many different challenges at the same time. That's quite an interesting pipeline, I would say. And hopefully we could shrink it.
Yeah, I would say like it's a tremendous amount of work that we put in, and also it's really hard and just like to fight on different fronts and just like bringing across the users and iterating the design, etc., the game mechanics, and also integrating the AI.
Quite challenges. And of course, even when you say, okay, this is the time where we do quick prototypes and you want to, of course, quickly iterate from this point on and evolve it, it's still somehow difficult. It's still somehow doing things fast, and we still get somehow hindered on this because you want to deliver something with quality. This game is something that you really wish to have a better quality, and it still is difficult because we get users' feedback, and which we love, and sometimes we estimate that things gonna take 1 day, and it ends up taking 4 days. Sometimes it take almost a week because you also are tackling different challenges. And this is a type of challenge that many startups face in an early stage. And of course, when they look back, they say, it was not that bad, or we manage it. But we're still living the moment. It's still not that easy. I mean, I wish we could have more solved stuff, and actually that we could even spend more time with customers and less time building it. But this iteration is like a key challenge to get the right products and the right quality of outcome. And this is an iteration phase. We have somewhere 1 month, actually 1 month, 1 week, if we're being exactly, as deadline approach for the Investors Day. And again, testing many of the technical elements. We still have been testing also with our physical cards about the new mechanics, the new effects, and how the gameplay evolves. And we had, I think it was last month, we actually had somehow a small tournament here in the office on the game. So we had some colleagues that came from Munich, also international colleagues, and it was good because we took a lot of pictures, we collect a lot of feedback. We also had already printed the board, so it was somehow easier to understand how the game would work. And this is something that we also study specifically in the mobile version, how to make the game very visible and still not hindered by too much element pollution. So you don't have this, we really want to avoid this pollution of objects in your screen. And of course the computer is very easy, but when you go to the mobile version, the challenge really arises. But thankfully we were doing a physical prototype tournament, and in this physical prototype you were, again, with just a Sharpie and a pen, you can easily change effects, or just as a part of a mutual agreement you are able to, all right, let's change this mechanic, let's change this, who starts the turn, can you attack with more than one card per turn, can you evolve this card, can you equip it, and all of these elements you can easily enter in an agreement with all the players, and you can easily see the effect, if it gets unbalanced or if something that's not right. So it was a very interesting tournament. We did this in a weekend, so they spent it, I think they arrived on Thursday, Friday. Oh yes, Friday evening. We had a very interesting Saturday together, and we did a competition actually on Sunday. So Sunday afternoon, they were preparing mostly to come back on Monday. So Sunday afternoon, we also ended up with a barbecue, and we could play with the cards. We printed some more. We still have some that has been erased and changed stats. There was one that we created, again, as an Easter egg based on our mentor, and we made it really, really overpowered. So it was something that, even though it was fun in the beginning, it really broke down the balance of the game, which actually was not bad. If we're being truly honest, when we had this card that was overpowered, that's where it arose the mechanic of if a card attacks, you have somehow this fatigue effect. So this histamine approach. So you can now just have one overpowered card that you can attack over and over over the rounds. So even with this type of extreme cases, you somehow learn from it and you create a new mechanic. This was with the colleagues, the one from Turkey and the other one, the international one as well. So within this type of extreme cases, you get this type of feedback. And in design thinking, if you remember these early discussions that we had in the first and second live, usually you were looking for a type of a person when you interview. You usually talk about extreme users. So extreme users are very interesting to talk with because they have original insights. They usually push things to the very end, and when you push things, pops up somehow in the end that is somehow unique. The same way that in ideation phase we generate this 100 ideas bucket, because when you generate these 100 ideas, you really push your imagination to the very end, and usually we're able to pick up 2, maybe 3 ideas. But if you just generate 5 ideas, they're not going to be that good. The likelihood that you have something breakthrough that's unique, original, and enriching is very, very low. So whenever you can, really push to the end, because as Albert Camus would say, that's where we find the truth. And that's how we we build startups from our perspective. that we're thinking about prototypes, another interesting element, when we talk about speed of execution, writing code, even today with generative artificial intelligence, when we are talking about writing code, you still have some delay because besides writing code comes debugging, comes the integration, and design thinking always indicates or always teaches and advocates about making things fast and meaningful. And physical prototypes are amazing, even for digital games, even for mock-ups of software. When you have something on paper and you just have a pen, it's so easy to draw what you mean, or like instead of having 30 minutes conversation, say, hey, this is the concept that I was thinking of, or this is the inspiration that comes from, and this element is going to be able to tackle this type of problem or challenge that you mentioned. And this type of thing you can easily do on paper, pen, and instead of spending 30 minutes talking, as sometimes, even though we fight against it, sometimes it happens, it's easily more show and not talk. And it's a very difficult exercise in the early phase, but as soon as you get used to it, and I think we somehow got in a good shape on this direction, we are able to take better decisions and take them way quicker than in a regular basis. And that's how you don't have to, it's not mandatory for a startup to be successful that you have chaotic things. Actually, the opposite. As more structured steps you have, the more easy and readable is the whole operation, and more easily is this process flow. And when you have this easy process flow, you usually get more outcomes. You have more predictability and you have bigger outcomes. And when we talk about timing, that's crucial. That's crucial from our side. So we have been doing these different types of approaches, specifically regarding startup buildings, and as mentioned in the early lives, design thinking is really what orientates how we build stuff, how we progress in a startup. And very likely, very likely, we're gonna have a different type of presentation of character. So we're finishing this design prototype of the new Absus TCG creature, and this type of creature is going to be hosting on explaining how the mechanic works, how this whole universe is operated, how is the game more interesting now, and really giving this onboarding on how this whole thing works. And that's somehow a challenge in the beginning, because besides the character, we have the game show, we have, okay, how does this functions, and you have this somehow interaction between. And that's a challenge, but that's of course a challenge that is worth facing. It's a challenge that's worth pursuing, and that's what we aim to do. We also have we have another information here. Let me quickly check. We also have a type of comment. I didn't notice it. Okay, but we have, okay, this is right. Okay, so this is working right. So probably have, yes, you already have the feedback. That's great. That's great. So we already have the feedback. That's good. And yes, we are in the right direction. And actually, where do we stand? So as I mentioned it, so we are in 5 weeks until our official Investors Day. And of course, internal deadlines, they always work. And why they work? Because when you have somehow, it's basically as you mentioned, when you need to organize your room. If you say that's gonna take 8 hours, it's gonna very likely take the 8 hours or even more.
That's for sure.
But if you say that you have 50 minutes, or maybe you have a partner that's going to visit your place in 30 minutes, I'm very confident you're gonna manage to clean it in a satisfactory way in this given time frame. And artificial deadlines are very important. So launches work bad, and when you have this type of artificial deadline, you're able to test so much stuff. You're able to test, for example, take this live as an example. We test audio, we test video, we test interaction, we test views, we test so many stuff. We test if there is positive or negative feedback, or if there is no feedback. And this is very important in order to, when you do something, you generate information. And with this information, you build the different stuff. So now we have a different scenario, for example. We have our new colleague here that's also bringing some attention, and changing new spaces, bringing new informations. All of this is interesting, and all of this creates better insights and feedbacks. And from these elements, we keep going. I'm also still thinking on how we're gonna set up this digital character. So for those of you who are already users of Absus TCG, very likely is going to be one of the characters from the Forest deck. We're still figuring which one is gonna be. Maybe it's gonna be the Forest Witch, but still is not well sure. But very likely we're still testing the voice system. We're still testing all these other elements about how this whole interaction is gonna be held. If it's gonna be just a character or the character with cards, and how this whole thing is going to be. So we're really eager to see, okay, what is the type of feedback that you guys have for us? What is the type of, how is the interaction? If it's cool, if it's bad, if it's weird. And from these elements, we start moving forward. And very likely also for the next launch, even though we have not next launch but next live, we're gonna have still some more of the edited physical prototypes, and I think it's gonna be an interesting mix. Let's see if it's also possible to present, even though with the character here, if it's also possible to present the physical prototypes, because comes to the question: do we have to move 100% digital? How does this difference of shooting happens? And these elements also need to be tested, specifically for our biggest launch, which is going to be on beginning of September. And this type of information are going to be tackled on, and we love to hear the feedback and comments on what you guys think, if it makes sense or not, and how can we better improve. And that's of course an interesting part of this whole startup journey. For people who we received 2 questions about design thinking. So basically, design thinking, as I already mentioned, is this human-centric approach. So everything that we build is around customers for customers. So everything that we plan and execute is for humans. And humans have different pains, needs, wishes, desires, and all of these insights we collect, we evaluate. There is this double diamond approach, which is the most well-known methodology on design thinking, which basically guides you on how to better create the solutions, how to be creative but following a structure, because you have deadlines, you have expectations to manage, and somehow you need to figure this out. And at the end of the cycle, usually 3 to 6 months, depending on how big your project is and how many people are involved, to be able to show something to the world, and not just build something in a lab very close to the world or in a basement. And of course, there are times that you work in the basement, there are times that you work on the lab, but most of the time you are in the outside world, talking with real people, getting real pains, getting rejected, getting no's, getting, hey, I'm not interested, or please go talk with person XIZ because this person is the right speaking person for your case. And collecting information, and with this information, building more cool things and creating better approaches. So this is basically a very brief resume about design thinking. And basically I think for the next days we're going to then have the digital model that's going to be used here in the presentation. And please comment what you think, if it makes sense, if it's weird, if it's interesting, because as I mentioned before, we read all the feedbacks, also the emails to Abyssus, and we always try to bring things that are cool for everybody. So, alright, thanks for watching, and wish you all a pleasant evening, independent on which country you are. See ya!